So what will the technology landscape look like in the US under Joe Biden? Well, I spoke to Peter Suciu via Zoom. He's a freelance writer and Forbes contributor. I asked him if there will be a continued adversarial relationship between tech and the new US administration.
We'll have more hearings. There might be more discussion about it. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be business as usual. I think one of the things we're seeing now with Facebook, we've seen it in the past with Microsoft, Google, Apple, other companies. These tech giants are giants for a reason. They do something better that their competitors don't do. So I don't see really what will happen. Maybe some more transparency, but I think going forward, 2021 and beyond, it's going to be business as usual for the tech industry.
And it's interesting because a lot of these companies really flourished under the Obama-Biden presidency. So it's interesting, though, now that we see that some of the Democratic Party, including notably Elizabeth Warren, really calling for the breakup of some of these big tech firms. Do you think that Biden will go down that road, especially since there seems to be a bipartisan issue, this real scrutiny of some of these big tech firms?
You know, this gets brought up all the time. Are these companies too big? The simple fact is, how do you break them up? Facebook became a giant, not simply because it bought up the competition, which in some cases it did, but because people preferred it to something like a Friendster or a MySpace. So going forward, what would happen? You would break Facebook up and some of the smaller entities would probably fail. They might not survive. And then Facebook would go back buying up those competitors. So we would be exactly where we are today.
And so even though obviously this is something that does keep coming up, is there anything the tech industry can do at this point to either sort of appease themselves or take the spotlight off of them?
Transparency. I think that would be one of the biggest things is transparency, especially on user data. I find it kind of an interesting quandrum that these tech companies are in because the business for these companies is to make money. And I think that's the thing a lot of people forget. They have to do a lot more than just keep the lights on, as some people have suggested. A company like Yahoo or a Facebook or a Google, they're out to make a profit. So they're going to have their hands in a lot of different pies, a lot of different areas. And at the end of the day, they want to be successful. But I think transparency is going to be the big issue. But I think consumers also have to understand they're the ones that should be the gatekeepers of their data. If you don't want the tech companies using your data, don't share it with them.
And certainly there does seem to be that sort of forgetfulness. So people do have the option to not be on Facebook or be anywhere else. So people definitely should keep that in mind. In terms of areas of agreement between Silicon Valley and Congress and Biden, where do you see them perhaps all honing in and agreeing on things?
Well, again, I think we're going to see greater transparency, how consumer data is used, those sort of initiatives. I do think, like I said, the companies need to be a little more transparent in how they're using data. And I think consumers also need to educate themselves on how these companies make money. I mean, I think people forget Facebook is a highly profitable company and they're profitable from advertising. And that's something that I think is lost on a lot of consumers in general today.
And people have to keep in mind it is free to be on these platforms, and
right.
should be mindful that usually if something is free, perhaps the product might be you and your data. So there really is an onus, a lot more accountability needed on behalf of users.
Right.
I want to talk about Chinese tech companies because we saw that they were under the spotlight under the Trump administration. Do you expect that to continue under Biden in 2021?
I really don't, because I think it's bigger than a single administration. We've certainly seen that the Five Eyes, the English-speaking nations that share intelligence between their intelligence communities, that's the United States, Canada, Great Britain, Australia, and New Zealand, they have agreements in place not to use Chinese tech in their government networks. In fact, there was quite a debacle of sorts when the UK was going to have some Chinese firms work on the rollout of their 5G networks, and eventually the government in the UK did a reverse course on that, but that had actually created some waves within the Five Eyes. So no, I don't see that we're going to have any changes with that. I think, no, I don't see any changes.
One thing that we may see a major shift in is obviously the focus on climate change, something that we continuously heard Biden make a priority on the campaign trail. How do you see tech perhaps playing a role in that goal?
Well, I think we hear a lot of things on the campaign trail. We hear it on both sides of the aisle. I think one of the things that the Democrats have certainly done is they've certainly tried to push climate change. They've tried to push the agenda. Personally, the way I wish the tech industry would take it on is to make products that are green, that are environmentally friendly, that consumers want to use. I think a good example of a failure, to be honest, is something like Tesla. They make a fantastic product that most Americans can't afford. So you're certainly not going to get people giving up their SUVs and their trucks, which are the dominant vehicle platforms in the United States, in favor of an electrical vehicle when the infrastructure to power those vehicles isn't there. So President-elect Biden can say all he wants, I'm going to direct the industry to do this. The industry is not going to follow through to produce products that consumers simply aren't going to want to buy. That's how I see it.